Let's uncover what is truly hidden between the lines of the most powerful psalm, Psalm 91. Surely you know that Psalm 91 is a prayer of God protection and has served as comfort and strength for thousands of believers across generations. But behind it lies something much deeper. Have you ever wondered why Psalm 91 is so powerful? Why even those who don't believe keep it open in their homes? This psalm is not just a simple set of verses. It is a covenant, a secret pact between heaven and those who invoke it. Herein lies its protective power. Think about all the times you've been on the edge of the abyss, when pain knocked at your door. Maybe in those moments you sought a sign, something to give you hope that things would change. Perhaps you even opened your Bible and prayed Psalm 91, and for a moment you felt relief. But what happens when the storms don't cease? What happens when, despite your faith, difficulties keep pounding on your door? And here comes the part that few want to accept. Psalm 91 is not a shield against difficulties. In fact, it's quite the opposite. This psalm invites you to step into the storm, to face it head-on, knowing you won't be alone. So, what is really behind Psalm 91? Let's begin unraveling the meaning of the first verse. Verse 1, Psalm 91. He who dwells in the shelter of the Most High will rest in the shadow of the Almighty. These words may seem like a promise of safety, but they hide a deeper, concealed meaning. Imagine this. You're walking through a scorching desert. The sun is relentless. Each step feels harder than the last, and there's no shade or rest. Your body begins to weaken. The heat consumes you. Just when you think you can't go on, you see a shadow. Instinctively, you run toward it. The shadow only gives you a fleeting moment of relief, yet that moment is enough. What once felt unbearable now seems manageable. This is what the verse is really saying. Dwelling under the shadow of the Almighty is not a guarantee that you'll never face storms, that life will be easy, or that you won't have to cross your own deserts. It's much deeper. The key lies in the word dwell. It's not a temporary refuge. It's not an occasional visit. It's a life decision. This verse is not for those seeking an easy way out. It's for those willing to stay, even when things turn dark and difficult. To dwell in the shelter of the Most High means accepting that, though chaos may continue outside, your soul will find rest under His shadow. But not everyone can find it, not because God hides it, but because to find it, you must cross a threshold that few are willing to step over, the threshold of total surrender. To live under that shadow, you must let go of everything else. And that's where most people fail, because Psalm 91 is a covenant of protection that requires unwavering surrender. But there's more hidden in this verse, something many don't see. The shadow of the Almighty is not just protection. It's also a test that few pass. Dwelling under the shelter of the Most High is not for the lukewarm, nor for those seeking temporary comfort. It's for those willing to face their worst fears, knowing that even when everything fails, that shadow will remain unshakable. Consider this. In the ancient Near East, shade was a symbol of life, protection from the scorching sun. But it was also a place of intimacy, of closeness. By taking refuge under the shadow of the Almighty, you're entering into a deeper relationship with Him, a relationship where you cannot hide. You're exposed, vulnerable. It's in that place where your fears, doubts, and darkest secrets come to light. And just when you think that shadow will bring relief, you realize it's also transforming you. For many, that transformation is terrifying because when you draw near to the Almighty, you can no longer remain the same person. What's really behind the first verse is not just a promise of security. It's a challenge to remain steadfast under that shadow, even when the world crumbles around you. A challenge to trust that though the storm may not disappear, though the desert remains relentless, God is still your refuge. Just as shade provides relief from the relentless heat and preserves life, the shadow of God offers rest and security that the world cannot penetrate. Thus, Psalm 91 begins with an invitation to enter a place of divine safety, a call to live in a deep, constant relationship with the Creator, where we find our true refuge and strength. Let's move on to the second verse. Verse 2, Psalm 91. I will say of the Lord, He is my refuge and my fortress, my God, in whom I trust. This verse seems simple, doesn't it? Declaring that God is our refuge, our fortress, and that we trust in Him sounds almost like a daily prayer, something we say without much thought. But have you ever stopped to dissect what you're really saying here? Because behind these words lies a much deeper revelation. And like everything in Psalm 91, it also comes with a price. First, think about the word refuge. We like the idea of a refuge, right? It's a place where we feel safe, where dangers can't reach us. It's that secure corner we run to when life gets tough. But here's the unexpected part. Saying that God is your refuge implies more than just seeking protection when danger arises. It means recognizing that outside of that refuge, nothing else is safe. In fact, there's nowhere else to run. And this is where the conflict arises. If you're truly honest with yourself, you'll realize that many times you trust more in things you can control. Your relationships, your job, your money. Those are your fortresses, your refuges. So when you say, "You are my refuge," do you really mean it? Have you truly let go of everything else? Because the truth is, this verse is not just a declaration of faith. It's a confrontation with your own fears. It's an invitation to release everything you think gives you security and to trust completely in something you can't see or control. Now, let's look at the word fortress. A refuge is where you hide, but a fortress is where you prepare to fight. By saying that God is your fortress, you're declaring that He won't just protect you, but will also give you the strength to face any battle that comes your way. But what if the battle isn't what you thought? Think about how many times you've been paralyzed by fear. Not physical fear, but the kind that creeps into your mind on the darkest nights, whispering that you're not good enough, that you won't make it, that you're alone. That's the real battle. And when you declare that God is your fortress, you're saying that He is the only one capable of giving you the strength to rise up and fight against those internal demons, those shadows that whisper in your ear that you're not enough. That strength doesn't come without pain or struggle. When you say, "You are my fortress," you're not asking for a life without problems. You're asking for the ability to endure, to persevere, to keep moving forward even when everything seems to be against you. You're acknowledging that the struggle won't disappear, and moreover, that you'll need to fight every single day. Trusting in God is not a passive act. It's an active war against everything that tries to separate you from Him, and especially against everything within yourself that tries to disconnect you from that faith. And then we arrive at the key point. My God, in whom I trust. This is the climax of the verse. Trust, easy to say, hard to live. Living, because deep down, trusting in God means one thing, letting go of control. And if we're truly honest, that's the hardest part, isn't it? How many times have you said you trust God, but deep down, you were devising your own escape plan, your own plan B? Saying you trust God means accepting that you no longer hold the reins, that your solutions, your answers, are not enough. And that's terrifying. Trust means that even when everything seems to be going wrong, you still believe He has a plan. Trust is looking around and seeing that the world is crumbling, yet knowing deep within your soul that somehow you're in the right hands. And here lies a real challenge. Trusting God isn't just for when everything is going well. It's especially for when everything is going wrong. It's easy to say, "I trust you," when things are under control. But can you keep trusting when you lose that control? When everything you know fades away? When you see no signs of things improving? That's what's behind this verse. It's not just a simple prayer. It's a challenge. It's a radical decision because trusting God isn't an easy way out. In fact, it's quite the opposite. It's saying, even though I don't understand, even though I don't see, even though I don't feel, I still believe in you. And in that moment, you discover the true power of these words. Because when everything else fails, when all the refuges you built crumble, when your personal strength isn't enough, there, in that place of absolute vulnerability, you find that God has been there all along. Your refuge, your fortress, the only one you can truly trust. True strength isn't the absence of fear. It's the ability to keep moving forward despite it. And that's when these words come alive in a way you never imagined. Let's continue with the next verses. Verses 3 to 4, Psalm 91. Surely He will deliver you from the snare of the fowler and from the deadly pestilence. He will cover you with His feathers, and under His wings you will find refuge. His truth will be your shield and rampart. Imagine for a moment that you're walking through a dense, dark forest, a place where danger lurks in every shadow. The air carries the invisible whispers of deadly plagues, diseases that can tear life apart as silently as night consumes the day. In this scenario, the promise of the verse resonates with overwhelming power. There is one who can deliver you from these imminent dangers, both seen and unseen. But not all the traps you face are out there. Some are in your own mind. What is the fowler? The fowler isn't always someone pursuing you with malicious physical intent. Sometimes it's that inner voice that traps you in its nets of doubt, fear, and despair. The snares spoken in the verse aren't just external situations. They're also those invisible traps the enemy sets in your heart. They're the dark thoughts that ensnare you in anguish, making you feel like there's no way out, that you're not strong enough, or that you'll never make it. But the worst trap isn't something you can see with your eyes. It's not a tangible enemy. It's the silent despair that grows when you think you're alone, when you believe everything is lost. The real fowler doesn't always come with a weapon in hand. Sometimes he comes disguised as thoughts that seem logical, reasonable, even inevitable, making you believe you have no way out, that things will never change. How many times have you fallen into that trap? How many times have you been on the verge of giving up because you thought there was no other way? But here's the answer for those who truly want to hear it. He will cover you with his feathers. Who would have imagined that God protection would be described as something so soft, so delicate? Feathers, wings? But don't be fooled by the gentleness of the image. These feathers are not fragile. They are a refuge stronger than any stone wall. Under those wings, you realize that strength doesn't always come the form you expect. It's not always an impenetrable fortress of steel. Sometimes, true strength is found in something as simple as allowing yourself to be vulnerable under God's care. And just when you think the refuge under God's wings is only an image of peace and security, the psalm hits you with something more. His truth will be your shield and rampart. This isn't just an invitation to hide. It's an invitation to fight. Because what is truth? Truth is more than pretty words or comforting ideas. It's a sword, a shield, something that protects you from lies, both on the outside and the ones you tell yourself. But what happens when the truth you need for protection is also the hardest truth to accept? The truth about who you are, about your fears, about the things you've been avoiding. Because for many, the most dangerous traps aren't the ones that are visible at first glance. They're the ones you carry inside, the deceptions you build around yourself to avoid facing what truly hurts. And that's the fowler's most dangerous trap of all: denial, refusing to see the truth, refusing to confront what needs to change. The shield of truth doesn't just protect you from external attacks. It confronts you. Once you cover yourself with that truth, you can no longer keep hiding. Here's the key. Taking refuge under God's wings isn't just about seeking safety. It's also about accepting his truth as your shield, which means you can't keep living in lies, in illusions. This verse, which at first seems like a promise of security, actually leads you to a profound confrontation with yourself. Because to be under God's wings, to be truly free from the fowler's traps, you have to face the truth. And that's not always comfortable. It's not always what you want to hear, but it's the only way to find true refuge. And then, just when you thought this verse was only about protection, you realize it's also about transformation. Because under God's wings, you don't just find safety. You find a truth that changes you from the inside, a truth that calls you to be brave, to look the fowler in the eye and tell him he no longer has power over you. Let's continue with the next verses. Verses 5 to 6, Psalm 91. You will not fear the terror of the night, nor the arrow that flies by day, nor the pestilence that stalks in the darkness, nor the plague that destroys at midday. This is one of those verses that, when you read it, might seem like a promise of total immunity, a guarantee that nothing bad will happen to you. But if you stop and think for a second, you know life isn't that simple. Fear, arrows, and plagues don't magically disappear just because you've read a psalm. So what does it really mean? What's behind these words? The verse begins by saying you will not fear the terror of the night. And here arises the first question. What is that terror? Darkness is where everything hidden takes shape, where the deepest worries you've tried to ignore during the day come to life. The terror of the night isn't just the fear of physical danger. It's the fear of the unknown, of an uncertain future, of those shadows in your mind that only grow bigger when the lights go out. Who hasn't felt that knot in their stomach upon waking in the middle of the night, when the thoughts you tried to avoid during the day become uncontrollable? But the most surprising thing is that this verse doesn't say the terror of the night will disappear. It doesn't say the shadows will dissipate or that the questions will vanish. What it says is that you will not fear, because fear is what truly paralyzes you, traps you, leaves you vulnerable. And just when you're wondering how it's possible to not be afraid, the verse takes you to the next twist. Nor the arrow that flies by day. During the day, when the world is awake and you're surrounded by distractions, the arrows of life can still strike. These arrows aren't always literal. They're the sudden, unexpected challenges that come flying at you when you least expect them. They're the words that wound, the betrayals that sting, the failures that knock you off balance. But again, the verse doesn't promise that the arrows won't come. It promises that you won't fear them. Why? Because fear is what gives them their power. When you live under God's protection, you begin to see that these arrows, while painful, cannot ultimately destroy you. Their sting is temporary, but your refuge is eternal. Then comes the next line, nor the pestilence that stalks in the darkness. The pestilence represents the unseen dangers, the silent threats that creep up on you without warning. It's the illness you didn't see coming, the betrayal you didn't anticipate, the loss that blindsides you. These are the things that haunt your mind, especially when you're alone in the dark. But again, the promise isn't that the pestilence won't come. It's that you won't fear it. Finally, the verse concludes, nor the plague that destroys at midday. Midday is when the sun is at its brightest, when everything should be clear and safe. But even in the light, destruction can come. The plague represents those moments when disaster strikes in the most unexpected ways, when life feels like it's falling apart, even in the midst of apparent stability. So what does this verse really mean? It's not a promise that you'll be immune to life's difficulties. It's a promise that you won't fear them. Because when you live under God's wings, when His truth becomes your shield, fear loses its grip on you. You may still face the terror of the night, the arrows of the day, the pestilence in the shadows, and the plague at midday, but you won't fear them. Why? Because you found a deeper refuge, a stronger fortress, a truth that transforms you from the inside out. This is the heart of Psalm 91. Not a life free from trouble, but a life free from fear. During the day, when everything seems under control, when the light reveals what is real, the arrows appear. And they're not just physical arrows. They're those words, those subtle attacks that wound you when you least expect it. How many times, in the clarity of day, have you felt exposed, hurt by a word, a glance, an unexpected act? These are the arrows that fly by day. You don't always see them coming, but when they arrive, they pierce through you. But once again, the verse doesn't say there will be no arrows. What it says is that you won't fear. And here lies the key. It doesn't promise a life without danger, without attacks, without pain. What it promises is something even deeper, that you won't live as a prisoner of fear. Because when you free yourself from fear, the arrows lose their power, the attacks lose their impact. And that's what this verse is truly offering. Freedom from fear, not freedom from circumstances. But how is it possible to not fear in the face of such real threats? Here's the unexpected answer. Trust, not in your own strength, not in your ability to avoid danger, but in something greater, something that doesn't waver with the storms of life. It's trust in the fact that though you can't control what happens outside, you can control what happens within you. And when you understand this, something changes. You realize that the true battle isn't about avoiding the arrows or hiding from the plague. The true battle is overcoming the fear that paralyzes you. And that's where you find the freedom this verse promises. Because yes, the night will still be dark, the arrows will still fly, the plagues will still stalk, but you will have changed. And then, not only will you live without fear, but you'll become invincible in the face of what once made you tremble. Let's continue with the 7th and 8th verses. Verses 7 to 8, Psalm 91. 1,000 may fall at your side and 10,000 at your right hand, but it will not come near you. You will only look with your eyes and see the recompense of the wicked. This verse seems to promise absolute immunity, a divine protection that covers you while everything around you collapses. But if you stop to think, there's something darker and deeper behind these words. It's not just a promise of protection. It's a challenge to the way you interpret chaos and justice. Imagine a scenario. You're on the battlefield of life. To your left, you see 1,000 people fall. To your right, 10,000 more. Chaos, fear, and destruction seem to surround you completely. The immediate question arises, how is it possible that in the midst of all this chaos, you remain standing? What keeps you firm when everything else is collapsing? It's not because you're immune to pain or disconnected from suffering. It's because you found a peace that transcends the chaos. You discover that your refuge isn't in circumstances, isn't things going well around you. It's in something much deeper. It's that inner peace, that strength that goes beyond what you can see or understand, that keeps you steady when everyone else falls. And here comes the most perplexing part. You will only look with your eyes and see the recompense of the wicked. This phrase seems like an invitation to calmly observe, to watch as the wicked receive their due. But what does it really mean to look with your eyes? Looking with your eyes goes far beyond witnessing the downfall of evildoers. It's about seeing with clarity, perceiving what's happening at a deeper level. Because in that moment of chaos, when everything seems to be collapsing, it's easy to get trapped in fear, despair, the thirst for vengeance, or the satisfaction of seeing others pay for their mistakes. But what this verse is asking you to do is to see beyond, to open your eyes and perceive that even in the midst of destruction, something greater is happening, a divine justice that transcends your understanding, an order that's being restored even though at first glance it seems like chaos. And here's the most surprising part. When you open your eyes, you don't just see God's judgment on others. You also begin to see yourself in a new way. You start to realize that the protection surrounding you isn't something you can earn or control. It's a gift, a divine refuge that doesn't depend on what you do, but on who you are in Him. Let's move on to the next verses. Verses 9 to 10, Psalm 91. Because you have made the Lord your refuge, the Most High your dwelling place, no evil shall befall you, no calamity shall come near your home. This is one of those passages that many read seeking almost magical security, as if by making God your refuge, all evil would suddenly vanish, as if calamity would evaporate before it reached your door. But if life has taught us anything, it's that problems, difficulties, and crises don't respect easy promises. So what's really behind these verses? Imagine the scenario. You've taken refuge, a safe place, a space where you believe nothing can touch you. But outside, the storm continues to rage. The wind beats with uncontrollable fury. Calamities seem to multiply. And yet, you remain inside, trusting. Here's where many get confused, because they think being under God's protection means everything around them will be perfect, that they'll be completely isolated from the chaos the world brings. But that's not the true meaning. The verse says no evil will befall you, and no calamity will come near your home. But what happens when evil does seem to approach? What happens when calamity arrives at your home? Here's where the true understanding lies. Because what this verse is really telling you isn't that you'll be exempt from the storm, but that in the midst of it, your soul will remain steadfast. Calamity may surround you. It may knock at your door, but there's something it cannot touch. Your inner peace, your connection with the divine. Think about the times you face moments of crisis. Those situations where it feels like everything around you is crumbling. Maybe sickness came into your family, or loss touched your life in ways you never expected. In those moments, it's natural to feel like God has failed, that this promise of protection hasn't been fulfilled. But here's the most impactful truth. The true refuge isn't physical. It's not something you can see with your eyes. It's a refuge that's built within you. It's the inexplicable peace that sustains you when evil lurks from every angle. So when the verse says no evil will befall you, it's not talking about a life without difficulties. It's talking about an internal fortitude that allows you to walk through fire without being consumed, to pass through the valley of the shadow of death without your spirit breaking. Evil cannot touch what you've entrusted to God. And here lies a mystery. Your refuge isn't the absence of problems. Your refuge is God Himself. And what God offers you isn't the elimination of storms, but His presence in the midst of them. But the verse continues, no calamity will come near your home. This phrase can be perplexing if taken literally, because we've all seen calamities reach places where we thought God was present. But the true meaning here is deeper. The home the verse refers to isn't just a physical house. It's the place where your faith dwells, the innermost part of your being, that space in your soul where you reside with God. And here's the key. Calamity can destroy what is material, but cannot touch what is eternal. Your home, the true home, is that place in your heart where you decided to make God your refuge. And as long as God is your dwelling place, no calamity can destroy what truly matters. This leads us to a crucial point. It's not that problems cease to exist when you make God your refuge. It's that their power over you fades. Evil loses its ability to control you. Calamities may touch what is external, but they cannot touch what is eternal. And that's where the true power of this verse lies. It's not about avoiding the storm. It's about finding peace in the eye of the hurricane. It's not a promise that you won't suffer. It's a promise that suffering won't define you, won't break you. This is a hidden secret that many times we don't want to see, because it's easier to believe that God's protection means nothing bad will happen. But reality is much more challenging, and at the same time, much more beautiful. What God offers you is the ability to walk through chaos without letting the chaos enter you. He offers you a peace that doesn't depend on circumstances, a peace that survives a storm, that blooms in the midst of destruction, and sustains you when everything else seems to be falling apart. When you make the Lord your refuge, what you're doing is surrendering control, letting go of the illusion that you can prevent calamities from coming. What you're doing is trusting that even when they arrive, they won't have the final word. And that's the most impactful part. Calamity can come, but it can't stay, because your home, your true home, is protected by something beyond what the world can touch. Your soul, your faith, your connection with God is what is truly under His protection. So, what's really behind these verses? It's not a promise that you'll never face trials. It's a promise that when you do, you'll face them from a place of unbreakable security. It's an invitation to live above fear, above circumstances. Because as long as your refuge is in God, no matter how strong the storm, no matter how many calamities threaten to destroy what you love, you will remain steadfast. And that's the true victory this passage promises. Let's continue with the next verses. Verses 11 to 12, Psalm 91. For He will command His angels concerning you to guard you in all your ways. They will lift you up in their hands so that you will not strike your foot against a stone. Here, Psalm 91 reaches a fascinating and profound point. The promise that God Himself sends His angels to care for you, to lift you up when you fall, is a powerful image. But as always, the hidden meaning goes far beyond the simple idea of divine protection. First, let's think about angels. It's not hard to imagine invisible, powerful celestial beings watching over every step you take. But the angels God sends aren't just passive guardians. They're not there only to prevent you from falling or to protect you from dangers you see coming. They're there to lift you up when you stumble, when you no longer have strength, when the path seems impossible to continue. And what does this really mean? It means that God knows you will stumble. He knows there will be moments when you feel weak, when your foot slips, when you lose emotional or spiritual balance. How many times have you felt like you're falling apart, like you can't go on? It's in those moments of weakness, of vulnerability, that this verse comes to life. God doesn't promise that you won't stumble. He promises that He will lift you up. And the most surprising part is how He will do it, through His angels. But don't think of angels only as distant, ethereal celestial beings. Many times, those angels come in the most unexpected forms. A friend who calls you just when you need it most, a word of encouragement that arrives from someone you didn't even know was thinking of you. Divine help doesn't always come with wings and radiant light. Sometimes the angels are people or signs God places in your life at the most critical moment, when you're about to fall. And here's where the verse deepens. It doesn't say in some paths. It doesn't say only when you're on the right route, or only when everything is going well. It says in all your ways. Even the paths you choose incorrectly, even when you get lost or stray, the angels are still there. God doesn't abandon you when you take the wrong road. He keeps sending His angels, keeps lifting you up, keeps ensuring you don't stumble to the point of not being able to rise again. Imagine you're walking along a path, and suddenly you find yourself in an unfamiliar area where the ground is unstable. full of rocks you hadn't noticed. You slip, you fall, but just before you hit the ground, something holds you, something lifts you up. That's what this verse is showing you. In moments when everything seems out of your control, when the road is harder than you thought, the angels are lifting you, not to prevent you from falling, but to ensure that when you fall, you don't stay down. This isn't a promise that God will prevent you from making mistakes or that He will make the terrain easy. It's a promise of closeness, of personal care. With their own hands implies a direct connection between the Creator and you. It's not distant, not cold or impersonal. God lifts you with His hands, with a touch of tenderness and power that tells you you're not alone, even when you feel defeated. But here's the hardest part of this verse, a message many don't want to accept. You will stumble. There's no way to walk through this life without encountering obstacles, without facing moments when you feel like you can't go on. Stumbling is inevitable. What this passage promises isn't the elimination of those stumbles. It's that they won't be your end. Those moments of falling won't be definitive. What determines whether those moments destroy you or not is whether you allow God, through His angels, to lift you up. And then, just when you think the message is only about protection and care, you realize this verse is also an invitation to humility. Because for the angels to lift you, first you have to recognize that you need help. You have to admit that you can't always walk alone, that you won't always be strong enough to avoid the stones on the path. You have to let them lift you. And for many, that's the hardest thing to accept. It's a promise that when you fall, when the terrain becomes impossible, when you feel like you can't go on, God will send His angels to lift you up. God doesn't ask you to be perfect. He doesn't ask you to never stumble. What He asks is that when you do stumble, you have the humility to accept His help, to let His angels lift you, to trust that though the road may be hard, you will never be alone on it. Let's continue with the next verse. Verse 13, Psalm 91. You will tread on the lion and the cobra. You will trample the great lion and the serpent. At first glance, this verse promises absolute victory, an invincible strength that will allow you to defeat the fiercest beasts and the most cunning enemies. But when you start unraveling what it really means to trample the lion and the cobra, you realize it's not as simple as a physical or literal victory. Behind these words lies a much more personal battle, a struggle everyone faces, but few recognize. First, there's a lion. The lion has always been a symbol of strength, ferocity, of something or someone that challenges you head on, that roars and intimidates you. We've all faced lions in our lives. They're those problems that attack you openly, that make you feel small and helpless, that corner you and leave you without options. Maybe it's an illness, maybe a personal or financial crisis that appears suddenly, like a deafening roar threatening to destroy everything you built. The lion doesn't hide. It comes straight at you. And the most terrifying part is that you see it coming. But sometimes you feel like there's nothing you can do. However, this verse tells you that you will crush it. It doesn't say the lion won't come. It doesn't say you won't face that imposing force. What it says is that you will have the power to crush it, to defeat it. But how? Not with your own strength, not with your human ability. God gives you the power to overcome it, the darkness. And that's where this verse takes an unexpected turn. A turn that forces you to confront the hardest realities of faith. He will call on me and I will answer him. I will be with him in times of trouble. At first glance, this seems like a beautiful, almost comforting promise. But when you dive deeper into its words, you uncover something far more profound and dramatic. What God is offering here isn't just an answer, and it's not just deliverance. He's offering His presence in the darkest moments, in the hardest hours of life. And here's where the verse takes that unexpected turn, a turn that challenges you to face the most difficult truths about faith. He will call on me and I will answer him. This phrase seems simple. You cry out and God responds. But how many times have you cried out and the response didn't come in the way you expected? How many times have you prayed in the midst of despair, only to feel silence? It's easy to think that when you call on God, the answer will be immediate, visible, something tangible you can recognize. But what this verse reveals is something more unsettling. God always answers, but not always in the way we expect. Imagine for a moment being at the bottom of the pit of anguish, when everything seems lost. In those moments, you cry out to God, asking for a way out, for a miracle. something to pull you out of the darkness. But God's response isn't always to immediately take you out of the darkness. Sometimes, His response is simply to be with you in it. This is where faith becomes real. God's presence isn't contingent on your circumstances improving. It's not dependent on Him removing the pain or fixing everything right away. His promise is to be there with you, even when the storm rages and the night feels endless. And while that might not sound like the answer you want, it's often the answer you need. Because sometimes, what we need most isn't for God to change our situation, but for Him to remind us that He's with us in it. The next part of the verse deepens this truth. I will be with him in times of trouble. Notice the emphasis. God doesn't say He'll remove the trouble. He says He'll be with you in it. That changes everything. It means that His presence isn't a reward for perfect faith or flawless living. It's a promise to those who are willing to keep calling on Him, even when they don't understand why the pain persists. And then comes the rest of the verse. I will deliver him and honor him. Here, God promises two things, deliverance and honor. Deliverance doesn't always mean immediate escape from the situation. Sometimes it means being delivered through a situation, coming out stronger, wiser, and more refined on the other side. It's about transformation, not just rescue. The trials may remain, but you emerge changed with a deeper faith and a clearer understanding of who God is. And then there's the promise of honor. What does it mean to be honored by God? It's not about worldly recognition or fame. It's about being lifted up in His eyes, being seen as faithful even in the midst of struggle. It's about standing firm when everything inside you wants to give up. When you remain steadfast, trusting in God even when the answers don't come quickly, you bring Him glory. And that brings honor to your own life as well. But let's pause for a moment and reflect on the weight of this promise. It's not a guarantee that life will be easy. It's not a promise that you'll avoid pain, loss, or hardship. What it is a covenant. If you call on Him, He will answer. If you seek His presence, He will be there. If you endure, He will deliver you. Not necessarily on your timeline, but on His. And in that process, He will fill you with honor. Not because of what you've done, but because of who He is. This verse also carries a sobering reminder. God's response isn't passive. He doesn't sit idly by while you struggle. He actively engages with you. He hears your cry. He steps into your pain, and He walks with you through the fire. But it requires something from you too. It requires that you keep calling on Him, even when it feels like He's silent. It requires that you trust Him, even when the answers don't come the way you hope. So what does this mean for you? It means that your relationship with God isn't transactional. You don't pray to get something. You pray because you need Him. It means that deliverance isn't always about escaping the storm. It's about finding peace in the middle of it. It means that honor isn't about recognition from others. It's about being faithful to God, even when no one else is watching. Let's continue unraveling the next verses. Verse 16, Psalm 91. With long life I will satisfy him and show him my salvation. At first glance, this verse seems to promise a long and prosperous life, an assurance that God will grant you years filled with health, happiness, and divine favor. But as with every verse in Psalm 91, the surface meaning hides a deeper, more profound truth. What does it really mean to be satisfied with long life? And what does it mean for God to show you His salvation? To begin, the phrase, with long life I will satisfy him, doesn't necessarily mean a life free from suffering or hardship. Long life, in this context, isn't just about the number of years you live. It's about the quality of life you experience in God's presence. True satisfaction comes not from avoiding pain, but from finding purpose and peace in the midst of it. It's about living a life that's deeply rooted in God, where even the hardest moments are infused with meaning, because you know He's with you. The second part of the verse, and show him my salvation, is equally powerful. Salvation here isn't just about being rescued from danger or difficulty. It's about experiencing God's ultimate deliverance, His redemption, His restoration, His eternal promise. It's about seeing His hand move in ways you couldn't have imagined, bringing beauty from ashes and hope from despair. But here's the key. God shows you salvation not just at the end of your journey, but along the way. It's in the moments of deepest pain that His salvation often becomes most visible. It's when you're at your weakest that His strength shines brightest. And it's when you feel most lost that his guidance becomes clearest. This verse reminds us that God's salvation isn't just a future event. It's a present reality. It's something you can experience today, even in the midst of trials. It's the assurance that no matter what happens, God is working all things together for your good. His salvation isn't just about saving you from something. It's about saving you for something. It's about preparing you for eternity, shaping you into the person he created you to be. So, what does this mean for you? It means that your life isn't defined by your circumstances. It's defined by your relationship with God. It means that true satisfaction comes not from avoiding pain, but from finding God in the midst of it. And it means that God's salvation isn't just a distant hope. It's a present reality that you can cling to no matter what you're facing. Psalm 91, from beginning to end, is an invitation, a call to trust in God's protection, his presence, and his promises. It's not a guarantee that life will be easy, but it is a promise that you won't face it alone. Whether you're wrestling with lions, navigating hidden snakes, or walking through the darkest valleys, God is with you, and that's the greatest promise of all. I will be with him in times of trouble. This is the central point of the verse. It doesn't promise that he will spare you from anguish or remove you from the moment you cry out. What it promises is his presence. God is not a distant observer in your darkest moments. In those hours when you feel there's no more hope, he is there. And this is the hardest part to accept because often what we desire most is not just his presence, but an immediate solution. We want the anguish to end. We want the pain to disappear. But this verse tells you something deeper. God's true response isn't to eliminate the pain, but to walk with you through it. And then comes the next part of the verse, a promise that seems almost contradictory. I will deliver him and honor him. How can you be delivered and at the same time walk through the darkest moments? Here's the key. God's deliverance isn't always immediate or physical. Sometimes true deliverance happens in the heart, in the moment when, in the midst of anguish, you discover strength you didn't know you had, a peace that surpasses understanding. The most surprising part is that often the process of being delivered first involves walking through the fire. God doesn't always take you out of the flames, but he promises that when you're in them, you won't be alone. And just when you think the worst is past, that deliverance is the end of the process. God adds something more. I will honor him. Most of us think of honor in terms of recognition, success, or rewards. But in the context of this verse, the honor God promises is much deeper. It's the result of having walked through the fire and come out stronger. It's the honor of having walked through anguish and found God in the darkest place. The true honor is a transformation that occurs in the soul when you discover that in your moment of greatest pain, God was there, sustaining you. This honor isn't just for the future. It's for now. Because although we often think the reward of faith comes at the end of the journey, what this verse reveals is that the honor is in the process itself. Every moment of anguish you endure, every time you cry out to God and find his presence, he is filling you with invisible but powerful honor. Now let's look at the final verse. Verse 16, Psalm 91. With long life I will satisfy him and show him my salvation. This verse seems so clear, so definitive, long life and salvation. Who wouldn't want this? It seems like a promise that encapsulates the deepest human longing, longevity, and at the end of it all, a secure salvation. But there's something much more powerful, much more surprising hidden within these words. Because the promise of God here isn't just more time on earth. It's the promise of full life. A life that, though marked by trials and difficulties, culminates in a joy and peace that the world cannot offer. When God says, with long life I will satisfy him, it's not just about the number of years you live. It's about the quality of those years. This isn't an empty promise of longevity. It's not just about living longer. It's about a life that is abundant, filled with purpose and meaning, a fullness that transcends what the world measures in terms of success or achievements. There are people who live many years but never feel like they've truly lived. God's promise here is different. He promises a life that is full, not just with experiences, but with divine purpose. A life where every day counts, where even the difficult moments have a deeper meaning because they are connected to an eternal plan. Imagine living a life where each year, each day, is not just time passing, but an opportunity to experience more of God's grace and mercy. Many years of life don't mean an absence of problems. You know there will be difficulties because the psalm itself says, I will be with him in times of trouble. But what this verse reveals is that God won't just give you more years. Those years will be filled with his presence, filled with a certainty that even though storms may come, your life is in his hands. But just when you think you've understood what many years of life means, the verse takes a turn, and show him my salvation. This is the climax, the point where everything makes sense. Because at the end of the day, what good is a long life if it doesn't include salvation? Here, God reveals his deepest promise. The true joy isn't in the number of years you live, but in knowing that your soul is secure. Salvation isn't just something you'll receive at the end of life. It's something you can experience here and now. It's a life where, even in the midst of challenges, you can have a certainty that no matter what happens, your end is sealed in eternity. The joy of salvation is a peace that transcends time, a deep knowledge that you are in God's hands and nothing can separate you from him. It's easy to think that salvation is just the end of pain, the end of struggles. But the true joy of salvation is being able to experience God in the midst of those struggles. It's knowing that even though life won't always be easy, even though there'll be moments of loss, anguish, and uncertainty, your destiny is secure. This joy is something few understand because it's not superficial happiness. It's not the joy that comes when everything is going well. It's a joy that arises from knowing that even when everything seems to be going wrong, your soul is safe. And it's not just a promise for the end of life. It's a promise for the present. Salvation isn't something you wait for until your last breath. It's something you can experience right now. It's a certainty that even though the world around you may be full of chaos, inside you there's a peace that cannot be destroyed. The joy of salvation is living each day with the knowledge that you have already been rescued, already been redeemed. And here's the most powerful part. This joy doesn't depend on external circumstances. It doesn't depend on whether life is easy or hard. The joy of salvation is unshakable because it's not based on what the world gives or takes away. It's based on what God has already done for you. You have already been saved. You have already been filled with his grace. And that joy is what allows you to walk through life with unshakable confidence, knowing that in the end, no matter what happens, your life is in God's hands. If you enjoyed this explanation, you can help by liking it so this message can reach others who, like you, may be seeking words of encouragement in times of uncertainty. Share this video with your loved ones so they too can receive this blessing. May God protect you and yours.